The message arrived like a breath of desperate hope in the silent cold of space. Far beyond human borders, in a distant star system that once shone bright, the signal came. Broken voice patterns, trembling with fear. The alien speakers of the Valori Union sent their plea across the void. "We are under attack, unknown forces. We beg for help. Anyone." And then the line went dead. On Earth, the world of humans, no one expected such a call to reach them. For centuries, humanity had kept to its own dark corner of the galaxy. They had grown strong, too strong, some said, in their harsh world called Earth, a death world, where life survived through storms and struggle, through broken moons and shifting climates. In that arena, they learned to fight, to endure, to live when everything worked against them. And in doing so, they earned the moniker Deathworlders. But now, in the quiet reaches at the edge of known space, the Valori's SOS arrived and stirred something deep inside humanity's heart. On the orbital station above Earth's moon, engineers at the communications array watched the recording loop again and again. Screens glowed with symbols they could barely decode. The voices were alien, the terror universal. It spoke of annihilation, of worlds burning, of a species gasping for mercy. On the command deck of the station, Admiral Rhea Morgan stood tall, her uniform crisp but her face tired. She had fought wars, seen loss, felt the weight of command in dark hours. Yet now she listened to the alien plea and memories rushed back. Memories of Earth's early days when no one had helped humans, when storms had raged, when pandemics had torn families, when war had come to their door, and no rescue ship turned up. Humanity had stood alone then. She thought of the ships on Earth. Vast black dreadnoughts sealed away in dry dock. Engines cold, silent. Ships meant for war but at rest for so long. In that moment, the young communications officer at her side tapped the screen. "Admiral, the signal is strong. They're requesting immediate assistance. System collapsing in hours." Morgan felt a chill. The Valori were pleading for time, for a hero, for any hand to steady their falling world. The memory of sorrow, of being abandoned, rose in her chest. And she made a decision. Humanity would not sit this out. They would not watch another species fall because no one stepped forward. On Earth below, in cities lit by neon and shadows, people paused their lives when the announcement came. The newsfeed flickered, showing the alien signal and humanity's silent watching. Some cried out, "Why?" Others whispered, "We must help." In schoolrooms, children asked about the message. Older people remembered the stories of Earth's struggle. And a quiet hope stirred, that humans, those who had grown in hardship, might now rise to something greater than themselves. On the moon station, the engineering teams worked fast. The dreadnoughts were awakened. The great hulls of the ships groaned as power flowed. Engines, once cold, now glowed red. Humans in black suits moved through corridors, securing systems, running diagnostics, readying weapons and shields. The raw energy hummed in the silence of space. Morgan walked through those corridors, touching the steel-cold walls. She thought of every person lost to war, every family torn apart, and she vowed that humanity would answer this call, not out of pride, not out of conquest, but simply because someone needed help. Because being silent when someone suffers is the worst kind of cruelty. The Valori SOS had reached human ears, and human hearts responded. The fleets would gather, the ships would move, the darkness would be pierced. But for now, there was only waiting, tension, and raw emotion. The stars outside the moon base window seemed already watching. Perhaps they had been waiting all along. In that time of quiet before action, humanity remembered its own story. How Earth had been unforgiving, how life had been fragile, how every day had been a fight. They remembered how they rose from ruin, how they survived when no one else cared, and now they would carry that memory outward, to the Valori and beyond. Admiral Morgan gathered her key officers in the command room. The large circular window framed the Earth in distance, a pale blue gem in the sea of black. She said simply, "We will go. We will answer. We will not let them fall alone." The words hung in the air. There was fear, yes. There was risk, yes. But there was something stronger. Resolve. The Vailori Union's world was burning. A species cried out. And humanity, a race once abandoned, once broken, once forced to survive on their own, now accepted the mission. The Deathworlder fleet would journey into the dark, into fire, into battle. Because when one life screams for help, humanity would answer. And so the engines of their ships began to pulse. The communication arrays prepared to transmit the coordinates. The frame of the human fleet took shape. The moment of decision arrived. The silence broke, and the message rang clear. Help is coming. The call in the dark would be answered. The moon shone pale over Earth, watching in silence as humanity prepared for something it had not done in centuries, go to war among the stars. Inside Luna Command Base, alarms pulsed softly through long metal halls. Engineers ran, officers shouted orders, and ships once forgotten began to breathe again. Admiral Rhea Morgan stood at the center of the command deck, hands clasped behind her back. Before her, massive screens displayed blueprints of the ancient Terran fleet, war machines built long ago when humanity had first reached for the stars. Their names carried history, pain, and pride. TSS Valkyrie, TSS Dauntless, TSS Reaper, ships forged during the Age of Fire, now being reborn. Status on the engines? Morgan asked, her voice steady but sharp. A young engineer replied, "Reactor 3 is stable. Plasma drive's coming online. It's really happening, ma'am." Morgan nodded once. "Good. Keep it that way." As she turned away, her reflection glimmered faintly in the glass, a weary face framed by streaks of silver hair, eyes that had seen too many battles. She whispered to herself, "They think we're monsters. Let's show them what kind of monsters we are." Across the solar system, news spread like fire. Humanity was answering an alien call for help. Some were afraid. Others were proud. Billions watched the transmissions in awe as the once silent Terran fleet prepared to rise again. In the vast dry dock around Luna, gigantic ship hulls floated in shadow. Their metal bodies were scarred from past wars, silent reminders of Earth's brutal history. But now, one by one, their lights flickered alive. Reactors hummed, cannons extended, fighters lined the decks, ready to launch. Technicians whispered among themselves as they worked. "Do you think we can really win this?" one asked. "We're humans," the other replied, tightening a bolt. "Winning isn't the point. Showing up is." On Earth, families gathered to watch the launch ceremonies. Children pointed at the night sky, searching for the streak of light that would mark the fleet's departure. Old veterans stood silently in front of their homes, saluting the heavens. It was more than a mission. It was a statement. Humanity would not ignore suffering. Not again. In the command center, Morgan received a transmission from Earth's High Council. The man on the screen, a politician in a perfect suit, looked nervous. "Admiral," he said carefully, "are you certain about this action? The Vailori are strangers. We know nothing about their enemies. What if this sparks another interstellar war?" Morgan's eyes turned cold. "They sent a call for help. We heard it. That's all that matters. But if we fail, then we fail," she interrupted. "But at least the galaxy will know we tried." The man fell silent. After a long pause, he whispered, "Godspeed, Admiral." The channel closed. Morgan exhaled slowly and turned to her second-in-command, Commander Elias Chen. He was younger, sharper, but with that same fire in his eyes. "Prepare the fleet," she ordered. "Every ship, every pilot. I want us ready to leave in 4 hours." "Yes, ma'am," he replied. Then after a pause, he asked, "Do you think the Vailori even know what's coming for them?" Morgan smiled faintly. "No, but they'll never forget it." 4 hours later, the docks trembled. The Terran Deathworlder fleet began its awakening. Thousands of engines ignited across the void, filling the blackness with a deep red glow. The soundless thunder of propulsion waves rippled through space as the ships aligned into formation. The Valkyrie, Morgan's flagship, led the vanguard. It was colossal, more fortress than vessel, its black hull marked with scars and the motto engraved on its side, "From ashes, we rise." Inside, soldiers stood ready in their armor, white and gray plates designed for survival in any environment. They were descendants of survivors, each one trained to fight not for glory but for each other. "Fleet command to all vessels." Morgan's voice echoed through the comms. "We have received a distress signal from the Valori Union. They are under attack by an unknown enemy. We are going to help them. Some of you may not return, but remember this. Humanity does not turn away from a cry for help. We are the cry. We are the answer." Silence followed. Then came a low chorus of voices from every ship, every deck, every heart. "For Earth, for all life!" The engines surged, the stars stretched. As the fleet began to move, Admiral Morgan watched the blue planet fade behind them. Earth's light slowly dimmed until it became just another star among billions. Commander Chen approached her. "Course set for Valori system. Estimated arrival 3 days, warp speed." Morgan nodded. "Let's bring them hope." From far beyond, other civilizations watched the transmissions in disbelief. Some called humans reckless. Others whispered that Deathworlders had finally left their cage again. But deep inside the hearts of the desperate Valori, who huddled on their dying worlds, the first sign of hope flickered. The signal had been answered, and so, through the black sea of stars, the Deathworlder fleet burned forward. Their engines roared like thunder across the void. Humanity was awake again, and the galaxy was about to remember why it had feared and admired the children of Earth. The journey through warp space felt endless. Outside the fleet, light twisted and danced like liquid fire. Inside the ship, silence ruled. Every crew member could feel it, the weight of what was coming. Admiral Rhea Morgan stood before the great viewing window of the Valkyrie, staring into the swirling abyss. Stars blurred into ribbons of light. To most species, warp travel was terrifying. To humans, it was familiar, just another storm to endure. Commander Elias Chen stepped beside her. "All systems stable. Fleet is holding formation. Hold to Valori system, 6 hours." Morgan didn't turn. "Any new transmissions?" "None," he said quietly. Their last signal was a scream. The words hung in the air. For a moment, Morgan closed her eyes. She imagined the alien worlds, cities burning, skies torn by war, people crying out to the stars for help. They must have believed no one would come. But humans knew that feeling. They had once screamed into the dark too. That memory fueled them now. In the lower decks, soldiers checked their gear in silence. Some wrote messages to families back home, knowing they might never send them. Others sat with their helmets off, staring at the floor, thinking about what kind of enemy could bring an entire civilization to its knees. Private Imani Reyes looked at her squad mates and said softly, "Do you think they'll even know who we are when we get there?" Sergeant Darius Holt smiled faintly. "Doesn't matter. They'll know what we did." The engine's hum deepened as the fleet exited warp. The stars snapped back into focus, cold, sharp, endless. And there, before them, was the Valori system. Gasps filled the bridge. On the main screen, the once beautiful world of Valora Prime hung in space, half of it glowing red with fire. Dozens of ships, dark insect-like things, swarmed the planet like locusts. Energy beams cut across the skies, tearing through cities. "By the stars," whispered Chen. "They're still attacking." "Get me a scan," Morgan ordered. Data flashed on the displays. The enemy ships were fast, armored, and coordinated. Their signals carried no words, no language, only a pulse of static and rage. Morgan's eyes narrowed. "They're not here to conquer. They're here to erase." The comm officer turned. "Admiral, incoming transmission from Valori Command Station. Weak signal. Patch it through." The screen flickered, showing a terrified Valori officer, face pale and covered in ash. "Whoever you are, please. Our defenses are gone. They're everywhere. We can't hold any longer." Behind him, the wall exploded. The transmission ended. The bridge went silent. Morgan looked out at the burning world. Then she spoke, her voice low but filled with power. "Commander Chen, prepare all ships for combat." He hesitated. "Ma'am, the enemy outnumbers us 10 to 1. I know. Then what are your orders? She smiled faintly, her eyes like steel. We show them what humans do when someone asks for help. Across the fleet, alarms sounded. Red lights flashed. The hum of engines grew into a thunderous roar. In the hangar bays, fighters launched one by one, sleek black arrows slicing into the void. Bombers followed, their wings unfolding like shadows. The Deathworlder fleet moved into formation. Valkyrie at the center, Dauntless and Reaper on her flanks, smaller destroyers forming a defensive ring. As they approached the enemy lines, the comms filled with static. The alien ships had detected them. The swarm shifted direction, hundreds of hostile vessels turning toward the newcomers, and then without warning, the stars lit up. The Krethul swarm opened fire. Energy beams sliced through the void, striking the human shields. The hull of Dauntless shook violently, alarm screaming, but the ship held. "Return fire," Morgan commanded, and humanity answered. From the Valkyrie's cannons came pillars of blue plasma cutting through the swarm. Missiles streaked out like burning comets, exploding among the enemy ranks. In seconds, space became a storm of light and fire. The Deathworlders fought with precision and fury. They didn't flinch when ships exploded around them. They didn't panic when their shields flickered. Humans were born in chaos. They were chaos given form. The first Krethul battleship broke apart under the combined fire of 3 Terran destroyers. Its remains scattered like embers into the void. But for every enemy ship that fell, 2 more took its place. "Enemy reinforcement wave incoming," shouted Chen. "Then we burn faster," Morgan said, her voice steady. On Valori Prime, survivors watched from underground shelters as streaks of light filled the skies. They saw fire and death, but also something else. The dark ships of the enemy were being torn apart. For the first time in weeks, the Valori felt hope. A child pointed upward. "Mother, who are they?" The mother's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know, my love. But they came for us." Hours passed. The battle raged. Space itself seemed to bleed. The Valkyrie took hit after hit. Decks shook. Sparks rained from broken panels. Yet the crew fought on. Morgan stood firm, shouting orders, refusing to retreat. At last, the enemy line began to crumble. The swarm faltered. Their formations broke. The Deathworlder fleet pressed forward. Relentless, merciless, and in that moment, the galaxy remembered what humanity truly was. Not conquerors, not monsters, but the storm that comes when the innocent cry for help. When the last wave of Krethul ships retreated into the dark, the silence that followed was deafening. Fire still burned, ships drifted, but the Valori world still turned. Admiral Morgan lowered her head. "Status report. Half our fleet damaged, hundreds dead," Chen said quietly. Morgan nodded. "And the Valori?" "Still alive." She took a deep breath. Then it was worth it. Outside, the stars flickered like candles in a storm. The Deathworlder fleet stood among the wreckage, battered, bloodied but unbroken. And for the first time in centuries, the galaxy saw what it truly meant when humanity answered a call. Smoke and silence filled the shattered orbit of Valori Prime. The first wave was over, but the war was not done. The human fleet drifted among wreckage, some of it theirs, most of it belonging to the enemy. The space between stars glowed with fading light from burning ships. On the Valkyrie's bridge, Admiral Rhea Morgan stood tall, though exhaustion darkened her eyes. Every breath felt heavy. Around her, crew members worked quietly, repairing systems and tending to the wounded. The air smelled of scorched metal and burnt circuits. Commander Chen read from a display. "Fleet losses, 30%. We've lost Reaper, Solstice, and 4 destroyers. Multiple ships are heavily damaged." Morgan nodded slowly. Her gaze moved to the main screen, showing the planet below. Half of Valori Prime was still burning. Great lines of fire cut across its surface, entire continents glowing with ruin. "Any signs of life?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," Chen replied. "We're detecting energy signatures, bunkers, maybe survivors underground." Morgan's expression softened slightly. "Then we fight for them." She turned toward the communications officer. "Send word to all ships, rearm, repair what we can. We go again in 1 hour," the officer hesitated. "Admiral, our fleet can barely hold. We're outnumbered and outgunned." Morgan's voice stayed calm. "So were our ancestors." That didn't stop them either. Deep below the planet's burning skies, the Valori huddled in underground shelters. The air was thick with dust and fear. Their cities had fallen, their fleets destroyed. For days they had expected only death. Then came the humans. Now, through cracks in the bunker walls, they could see flashes of light in the heavens, blue and red fire fighting against the endless black. They watched those distant explosions and whispered prayers to stars they had once thought empty. An old Valori scientist sat near a broken console, her voice trembling. "They came. Someone actually came for us." Her student, a young boy with pale silver skin, asked quietly, "Who are they?" She smiled weakly. "The ones who remember what it means to be alone." Back in orbit, the Krathul swarm regrouped. Thousands of their ships crawled out from the shadows of moons and asteroids. They moved with chilling precision like a single dark mind. The swarm had lost a battle, but not the war. Sensors screamed on every human ship. "Admiral," Chen reported, "enemy reinforcements incoming. 5 fleets closing fast." Morgan took a deep breath. Her crew looked to her, waiting for orders. She felt the weight of every soul aboard every ship. Fear was there, but so was fire. "Form the line," she said. "We meet them head on." The Deathworlder fleet moved again. Engines burned bright, cutting across the darkness like fire through oil. The ships took formation, black armor glinting under distant starlight. The Krathul opened fire first. Red beams tore through the void, slicing past the Valkyries' shields. One of the human cruisers, the Dauntless, took a direct hit and vanished in an explosion of light. But even as it died, its final transmission came through the comms. "Tell Earth, we held the line." The fleet pressed on. Human fighters darted between enemy cruisers, weaving through debris, firing missiles into exposed hulls. Pilots shouted over comms, their voices calm but fierce. "Target down! Cover my 6! For Valori!" Admiral Morgan's command ship shook violently as another blast struck near the bridge. Sparks rained down, consoles flickered, but she didn't move. Her hand rested on the control rail as she barked, "Return fire! All batteries full burn," and the Valkyrie answered. Twin plasma lances cut through the darkness, slicing clean through the lead Krathul battleship. It split apart like paper, a burst of white light blooming in the void. "Direct hit," shouted Chen. Morgan gave a small nod. "Good. Now give them another." Hours passed like minutes. The human ships bled, yet they refused to die. Each time one fell, another moved forward to fill its place. There was no retreat, no surrender, only defiance. The Krathul fought with overwhelming numbers, but not with heart. The humans fought with both. Every missile carried grief. Every beam carried rage. In the chaos, a Valori transmission broke through. "Human ships. We see you. You fight for us. You are not alone." A rare smile touched Morgan's lips. "Then fight with us," she replied. "Take back your sky." Moments later, small Valori defense ships, long hidden and damaged, rose from the planet. They joined the battle beside the humans, weak, wounded, but determined. And for the first time, the swarm hesitated. The final push began. Morgan stood at the front of the bridge, eyes locked on the enemy command ship, massive, black, pulsing with red light. "That's the hive," Chen said. Morgan's voice was cold and steady. "Then we cut off the head." Every gun on the Valkyrie fired. Plasma lances, kinetic rounds, and rail slugs tore through space, ripping open the Krathul flagship. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the alien ship erupted in a fireball brighter than any star. The swarm screamed through the comms, a haunting digital wail. One by one, the enemy ships lost coordination and broke apart. When the last Krathul vessel fell silent, so did the battlefield. The Deathworlder fleet hung in the ruins of war. Half their ships were gone. Many would never fly again. But Valori Prime still turned beneath them, alive. Morgan leaned against the console, her voice soft now. "Status?" "Enemy destroyed," Chen said, tears in his eyes. "We did it," she nodded slowly. "No, Commander. We endured." Outside, the fires of battle faded into starlight. The Valori looked up from their shelters and saw the heavens clearing. For the first time in weeks, the night sky was peaceful, and far above, the battered human ships drifted quietly. A fleet of angels made of steel, scarred but undefeated. They had come from the death world called Earth. They had answered the call, and they had burned through the darkness to save strangers who once believed they were alone. The stars were quiet again, but the silence was not peace. It was the kind of silence that comes after screaming, the silence of loss. The battlefield around Valori Prime floated in ruin. Wreckage drifted like ghosts through the void. Broken ships turned slowly, their hulls scarred and blackened. The proud banners of the Terran fleet, once shining, now hung torn and burned. Inside the Valkyrie, Admiral Rhea Morgan stood before the great viewing window. Her reflection looked older than it had a day ago. She could see the wreckage of the Dauntless far in the distance, its once mighty frame now just a burning shadow. "Status report," she said softly. Commander Chen's voice trembled. "We've confirmed losses on 21 ships. Thousands dead, hundreds more wounded. Half the fleet can't move without repair." Morgan closed her eyes. The words fell heavy. Each number was a name, a face, a story that would never return home. "And the Valori?" she asked quietly. "Alive," Chen answered. "Their planet is damaged, but their people survived. They're sending transmissions of thanks from across the surface." Morgan nodded once. Then it was worth it. In the medical bay, the wounded lay in long rows. The air smelled of antiseptic and blood. Med drones floated between stretchers, whispering soft beeps as they patched torn armor and bandaged burned skin. Private Reyes, her arm in a sling, stared at the ceiling. She could still hear the screams from the comms, the explosions, the sound of her ship breaking apart. Beside her, Sergeant Holt sat with one leg gone, humming an old Earth song. "We made it," Reyes said weakly. Holt nodded. "We always do." Then his eyes softened. "But not all of us." Across from them, another soldier cried quietly over a fallen friend's tag. The sobs were small, tired, real. Far below, on the planet's surface, the Valori stepped out from their shelters for the first time in weeks. The air was filled with smoke and dust, but the sky was finally free of enemy ships. Children pointed upward at the human vessels hovering like stars. Families held hands and whispered prayers. Elder Lithra, leader of the Valori Council, stood before a broken city and spoke into a repaired transmitter. "To the people of Earth, to the humans who came for us, we owe you our lives. We thought the galaxy had forgotten us. We thought hope was dead. But you, children of a world we feared, you became our saviors." The message played across every ship of the Terran fleet. Crew members stopped what they were doing, listening in silence. Morgan watched it from the bridge, her expression unreadable. When the broadcast ended, Chen said softly, "They're calling us heroes." Morgan shook her head. "Heroes don't leave this many dead." Later, she walked alone through the Valkyrie's lower decks. Everywhere she went, people saluted, some smiling weakly, some crying. She nodded to them all, but her heart was heavy. At the viewing bay, she stopped. The glass before her showed the field of wreckage, the price of victory. She spoke quietly, as if to the stars themselves. "You gave everything for strangers. No medals, no parades, just silence and fire. That's who we are." Behind her, Chen approached. "We've finished evacuating survivors from the other ships. Repairs are beginning." Morgan nodded without turning. "Send crews to recover our dead. Every one of them goes home." "Yes, Admiral." He hesitated before asking, "What message should I send to Earth?" Morgan looked out into the endless black and said, "Tell them we answered the call, and tell them what it cost." Days passed. The fleet worked among the stars like quiet mourners. They repaired what they could, salvaged what they must, and buried their fallen in the only place big enough to hold them, the void. One by one, bodies were released into space, wrapped in dark cloth marked with a silver earth. The ships dimmed their lights as each name was read. No music played, no speeches, just the steady voice of an officer reciting names and the cold whisper of airlocks opening. When it was done, Morgan ordered the fleet's engines cut. For 1 full hour, every ship floated in silence. The stars themselves seemed to bow. In that hour, something changed in the hearts of the Valori. They had seen the humans not as monsters or warriors, but as people who bled and mourned just as they did. Their children would grow up hearing the names of human ships as songs of salvation. And in every Valori city that survived, one statue began to rise, a tall figure of a human soldier holding a torch of light. At its base, the words read, "They came from the Deathworld and they gave us life." When the hour of silence ended, Morgan returned to her chair. "Prepare for departure," she said softly. Chen looked surprised. "Leaving so soon?" "We've done what we came for," she replied. "They can build the rest." As the engines flared to life, the Valori sent one final message. "To the Deathworlders, may your fire never fade." The Valkyrie turned toward the stars. Behind them, Valori Prime glimmered faintly, a scarred but living world. Morgan took one last look at it and whispered, "Rest now. You're safe." The stars swallowed the fleet as it left orbit, its lights fading into the dark. The war was won, but the cost was written across every human heart. They had answered the call with courage, and they had paid for it in fire. Months had passed since the Battle of Valori Prime. The scars of war still marked both the sky and the soul. The Terran fleet was returning home. Damaged ships crawled through space like wounded beasts, their hulls scorched and patched. Inside them, soldiers carried silent memories of fire and loss. No songs, no cheers, just the quiet hum of engines and the whisper of ghosts. Admiral Rhea Morgan sat in her quarters, staring at a single data chip resting on the desk. It contained every message, every name, every moment recorded during the war. She reached out and brushed it with her fingers, as if touching it could somehow ease the weight it carried. She looked out the window. Stars drifted by slowly, cold and distant. To her, each one looked like a fallen soul burning forever in the dark. On Earth, the news of the victory spread like wildfire. The whole planet celebrated. The Deathworlders had done the impossible again. The alien Valori were alive. Humanity had once more proven that their fire could not be extinguished. Cities on Earth glowed with lights, banners waved, and children played with toy starships named after the Valkyrie and Dauntless. But while the world cheered, those who had fought could not join the noise. In hospitals orbiting Mars and Luna, veterans lay with metal limbs and haunted eyes. They didn't speak much. They just stared at the stars and waited for the silence to pass. Private Reyes walked with a cane now. The burns on her arm were healed, but the pain behind her eyes remained. Every time she slept, she saw the flash of exploding ships and the sound of her friends' voices fading in static. Sergeant Holt, now fitted with a prosthetic leg, tried to smile as people called him a hero. But he always said the same thing: heroes come home. Legends don't. In the United Earth Council chambers, politicians and generals argued about what to do next. Some said the fleet should rest. Others wanted to send aid to more alien worlds, calling for help after seeing the humans' power. But Morgan, now back on Earth, stood before them with quiet eyes and a tired voice. "We cannot fight every war," she said. "We came when they needed us. That was enough. If humanity becomes the sword for every cry in the dark, one day there will be nothing left of us to hold it." The council chamber fell silent. They could hear the fatigue in her words, the kind that came from losing too much and gaining too little. Meanwhile, on Valori Prime, the survivors rebuilt their cities. They planted gardens in the ashes, raised new walls where ruins stood, and taught their children the names of the humans who saved them. In the great square of Lethra City, the statue of the human soldier holding a torch was finally completed. The Valori gathered there under the twin moons, singing songs of remembrance. Elder Lethra spoke to her people. "The humans came from a world of storms and fire. We feared them once. But when our sky burned, they came not to conquer, but to protect. Never forget the fire that saved us." At that moment, thousands of lanterns rose into the air, glowing softly. They floated up toward the heavens, a silent tribute to those who had fallen. Back on Earth, Morgan received a message from Valori. It was simple, just a few words. "Your fire gave us dawn. We will carry its light." She read it in silence, then leaned back in her chair. For the first time since the battle, she allowed herself a faint smile, but the smile faded as she opened a private file. It contained reports from the outer colonies, strange signals, coded distress calls from other worlds. It seemed the galaxy had noticed humanity's fire, and not all who noticed were grateful. The Terran fleet's victory had inspired hope in some, and fear in others. That night, Morgan stood on a balcony overlooking New London. The sky was full of stars, and she thought about how far humanity had come. Once, Earth had been alone, small, fragile. Now they were the defenders of the helpless, the storm that answered cries in the void. But at what cost? Her reflection in the glass looked older still, her eyes shadowed. She whispered to herself, "We became their shield." But every shield cracks sooner or later. She looked up again at the stars and wondered if the next call for help would come soon. Too soon. Behind her, the sound of footsteps echoed. Commander Chen stepped forward, holding a tablet. "Admiral," he said quietly, There's something you need to see. A signal. From the Perseus Rim. Morgan's hand tightened on the railing. Another distress call? He nodded. Yes, ma'am. Unknown species. Same message format as before. She took a slow breath. And Earth? They want to know if we'll answer. For a long moment, she said nothing. The wind carried the distant sounds of laughter from the city below. Then she turned, her eyes calm but burning with that old familiar fire. Prepare the fleet, she said. If they're calling for help, humanity will answer. Chen hesitated. Even after all we lost? Morgan's gaze softened, and a tear slid down her cheek. Because of all we lost, the night sky blazed as the Deathworlder fleet lifted once. Again from Earth's surface, shining, like a line of stars rising to meet the unknown. The galaxy would remember that sight forever, the humans born of a world of fire, once more leaving their home not for glory or conquest, but because someone, somewhere, had whispered for help. The stars were waiting, cold, endless, and full of secrets. The Terran fleet moved through the black sea of space, engines glowing softly like embers of a dying fire. But this fire did not fade. It carried the promise of 1,000 souls who had fought, fallen, and risen again. Admiral Rhea Morgan stood once more on the bridge of the Valkyrie, her uniform pressed, her eyes steady. Around her, the crew worked in silence. Every man and woman knew what was coming. They were heading toward the Perseus Rim, where the new signal had been found. No one knew who had sent it. No one knew what waited for them there. But they all knew one thing. Someone was in danger. And that was enough. Commander Chen approached, his voice low. Signal strength increasing, Admiral. It's definitely a distress call, Morgan nodded. Patch it through. The speakers filled with static, then a broken voice, desperate, weak, trembling with fear. To anyone who can hear, they are coming. Our worlds are burning. Please help us. Then silence. The bridge crew exchanged uneasy looks. It was the same tone, the same hopelessness they had heard from the Valori months ago. Morgan's heart ached. Another world, another cry, another chance to prove what humanity stood for. As the fleet neared the signal's coordinates, they began picking up strange readings. Entire systems were dark, planets without power, ships drifting cold and empty. It felt like a graveyard. Private Reyes stood at her post staring at the hollow remains of a once-living world. It's like something ate the light itself, she whispered. Sergeant Holt, standing beside her, rested a hand on her shoulder. Then we'll bring it back. Those simple words carried the kind of strength only humans could have, the will to walk into darkness and light a match, even when their hands were shaking. When they finally reached the source, they saw it. A planet half destroyed, floating in the shadow of a dying sun. Cities burned across its surface, and strange black ships orbited it, cold, sharp, alive with alien movement. The enemy was unknown, but their cruelty was clear. The fleet watched as those dark ships bombarded the last surviving colonies below. Chen looked at Morgan. Orders? She didn't speak for a moment. Her eyes were wet, but fierce. We answer the call. The battle began like thunder in the void. Human ships roared forward, their cannons spitting fire. The black ships turned to meet them, silent and deadly. Beams of blue light cut through space, tearing metal apart. The Valkyrie shook violently, alarms blaring. Shields at 40%. A voice shouted, Hold the line. Morgan yelled back. No one breaks formation. Her fleet moved like a single heartbeat, fast, focused, fearless. The humans fought not for conquest, not for glory, but for those voices crying in the dark. Even as ships fell, even as hulls cracked, they pushed forward. Reyes watched her display flash red. We're hit! Hull breach on deck 5. Holt gritted his teeth. Seal it and reroute power. We're not done yet. They fought until their hands bled, until their eyes burned with exhaustion. Every explosion outside was another heartbeat of humanity refusing to die. The alien fleet tried to retreat, but humanity was relentless. The fire of Earth chased them down, breaking through their lines, burning through their ships. The Deathworlders, that was what the galaxy called them. And that night, the galaxy saw why. When the last enemy ship exploded, the sky lit up with brilliant white light. The stars themselves seemed to shine brighter, as if cheering. Hours later, silence fell again. But this time it was the silence of victory. The surviving alien refugees sent a message of thanks. They called themselves the Tavaran, a peaceful race that had lost everything to the Shadow Fleet. Morgan listened as their leader, a small frail being with golden eyes, spoke in a trembling voice. We believed all hope was gone. But your kind, you came through the fire. You came for us. Morgan bowed her head slightly. No one should face the dark alone, she said softly. Later, the Valkyrie drifted above the ruined planet. The battle was over, but the cost was high again. Many ships were gone, many lives lost. Morgan stood at the window watching the sunrise rise over the planet's broken surface. It was faint, but it was light. Chen stepped beside her. We did it again, Admiral. Another world saved. Morgan didn't smile. She just nodded slowly. Yes, and another piece of us gone. She turned away from the glass. But that's what it means to be human, Chen. We burn so others can live. When the fleet prepared to leave, the Tivarine sent one last transmission. It was simple. Just a phrase glowing in soft golden letters across every human ship's screen. When the dark came, the fire answered. The crew of the Valkyrie stood in silence, staring at those words. Some wept, some saluted. Some just looked out at the stars and whispered names of friends who would never return. Morgan closed her eyes and whispered too. For them, and for all yet to come. As the Terran fleet turned home once more, the stars lit their path. They had no gods, no destiny, just courage, grief, and fire. Across the galaxy, civilizations would tell the story of the humans, the Deathworlders who came from a savage world but carried hearts strong enough to protect the weak, even at the cost of their own. And somewhere far beyond sight, in the cold dark between stars, a new distress call began to echo, a soft voice, faint but clear, crying out into the endless night. And though it would take months for the signal to reach Earth, one thing was already certain. When it did, humanity would answer.